Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt and I'm here with one of the strangest things I've probably ever reviewed. This is the three-wheeled Polaris Slingshot, and I'm going to walk you around this thing and show you everything that you need to know, and then we're going to go for a bit of a drive and talk about some of the nuances with the Slingshot. First, let's talk about what's new for this year, 2024. Well, this is kind of an update year. The last update was a complete overhaul in 2019. The Slingshot itself came out in about 2015. For this year now, you have some new paint options and some new graphics packages. The paint options are Radar Blue, Gold Rush, and Purple Lightning. Imagine having a purple Slingshot. That would be really something. The SL trim gets new wheels, and you now have Stage 2 audio, and it's now 200 watts of power versus 100. And you've got Rockford fosgate speakers. You've also got your Roush edition back this year, and you have a number of roof selections. You've got heated and cooled seats, you've got a roll hoop Stage 3 audio system, and you've got storage bags, accessories available to you, and they've generally just kind of updated the styling here. So a lot of new things for 2024. And then this is the part of the video where we talk about competitors or even just what this thing is. And it's interesting, Polaris calls it an autocycle, whatever that means. You can drive it with a normal driver's license, but on the back you see the plate here is like a motorcycle plate. And in the center here, it says, warning, this is a motorcycle, always wear a full DOT certified full face helmet. And I have done. So I guess that settles it, motorcycle. But it's not using a motorcycle engine. Now to pop the hood, you've got this little lever here. You pull up on that, and then it comes loose. And then you pull it towards you, and it hinges from the front. But then under the hood, what you have is going to be a 2-liter naturally aspirated Polaris engine. 4 cylinders, 178 horsepower as base with 120 pound-feet. That's for your S and SL trims. We've got the big power for our R trim here, 203 horsepower then and 144 pound-feet. That's the tune you're going to get for everything aside from the S and the SL. But then where does the power go? You do have a manual here. You can get an automatic. That was new for, I think, 2019, but we've got the 5-speed manual here, which has been quite fun. But as you can see, this is a belt-driven car like you would see from a motorcycle. It's also got 3 wheels, if you've noticed that. The engine itself revs up to 8,500 RPM, and it is seemingly happiest when it's higher up in the rev range. It revs freely, it's really fun to ring out, it's loud, it's really pretty fun. But then in terms of weight and dynamics, this Slingshot is about 1,700 pounds. It's loud and it smells a little bit like gas and oil. It's a very raw experience, but it is quite fun to drive, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get behind the wheel. But it is easy to lose the back end a little bit. This thing likes to slide and dance around because, well, you only have one wheel out the back. But the R trim that we have here is the more sporty oriented one. You can tell because we've got the little R designation up here. But that means then we get 11-inch wide wheels, which is quite nice because sporty. And you see these red brakes. These are Brembos. We've got Brembos on the car. Now, to be honest, the braking has not been fantastic. There's not a lot of bite. There's some progression to the pedal, but there's not a lot of top end bite. So you kind of got to go searching for braking power. But either way, this thing is short and it's wide and it handles pretty well. This thing is an inch wider than a C8 Corvette. So it feels relatively planted with a nice, fun back end. And as we talk styling, you would be hard-pressed to find something more unique looking, whether good or bad, on the road than a Slingshot. Now, the looks have been refreshed for this year. You get revised headlights. You get loads of angles and cuts and grooves. You've got vents everywhere. I mean, look at this front, I guess you would call it bumper, but you can see everything. You can see the wheels. You can see the suspension components. Of course, your shocks and your springs are lime green to complement your military OD green style paint job. Now this R trim gets an additional graphics package, so you got all these little stickers and everything around the body to make it feel a little bit more special. You also have these Batman style wing mirrors, which are very cool. But you do get a windshield. This actually does a lot of work. It's not very tall. It doesn't cover your face or anything, but it does deflect a lot of wind. Although we'll talk about that a little bit more behind the wheel. But you also see you don't have any doors to speak of. And when I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this bar here. Now this is obviously structural, this is metal, very important part of the car. But it's also, when you're getting into the car, you really got to lift your foot and I have hit my shin on this a couple times. So you don't have any conventional doors to speak of. You also don't have a roof as standard, but you can option a couple different types of roofs. The thing is, if you have the roof up, that's great, you're gonna have some sun protection, but the windshield is never going to actually go up and meet the roof, so just something to note. But overall, there's so much styling and grooving going on with this Slingshot. I don't even know where to start or where to end, but it just looks pretty wild, wouldn't you say? Leave it down in the comments what you like or don't like about this. Now, if at this point you're saying to yourself, Matt, sure, it's kind of funky looking, you said it's fun to drive, but how practical is it? Polaris actually says that 33% of Slingshot owners daily this. Those people are mental for sure, but they're not as mental as you might think. I actually did take this thing to Costco, and I got a pretty average sized haul that I would normally get, and this handled it. I did have to have some raw chicken breast and some Honey Nut Cheerios in the footwell, but other than that, it's pretty practical. You do have a conventional glove box. It's pretty deep. It's got my wallet in there for reference, I suppose. But from there, of course, you've got cup holders, pretty practical. A little bit of storage in here. I don't know what this is, but you could put something here. You've also got some outlets up here. But the main storage is going to be when you fold the seat away, and then you've got these bins. Now, like it says, you have to wear a full face helmet. Both my helmets fit in these little cubbies. This is also where I put most of the stuff from Costco. So when you actually break it down, and there's one to get behind the driver's side too, but when you break it down, this has probably, including the trunk on a Miata, just about similar practicality. So I have to say I'm pretty impressed. But since we were just messing with the seats, let's talk about them. They're multi-textured, you could say. It's somewhere between a vinyl and a leather. There's a lot going on. There's some Polaris stitching in here, heat, cool. So what you actually can option is this right here. Heated and cooled seats, and they medium work. They're okay. I can feel it, but it's not like a conditional or like a conventional air conditioned seat. It doesn't like really blow on you. It just kind of feels like there's something underneath the seat that's getting cold and then radiating through that you can feel, which is, to be honest, pretty nice, especially with the sun beating down on a black seat. I do like to have that. The other thing though is they need to be a little bit more bolstered. For the fun that you get driving this behind the wheel and how much you can slide and play with it and have some fun, I would like a little bit more bolstering from the seat, but then you're also making trade-offs getting in and out and the egress and ingress and that sort of thing. So I do generally like the seats, and I'm pretty impressed that you can get heated and cooled. Otherwise they are manual, but still pretty good. But then just generally speaking on the interior materials, it is intended to be kind of with the roof left off. You don't have to have the roof. The guy that I picked this up from, it's been raining almost every day this summer in Milwaukee. The guy I picked it up from didn't have the roof. We don't have the roof here. And he said, well, since I couldn't put it in my garage, it's been rained on about 4 times. And that's the point. That's why you have the plastics and some of the more durable materials, because it's meant to get wet. It's meant to get kind of beat on. It's meant to be, you know, rented out to people in beach towns and just kind of be beat on, and it's okay having that. Now you do, again, have the practicality of 2 cup holders. That's 2 more than I had in my E30. You've got a little spot for your phone, glove box. So generally everything is kind of shielded and protected. The screen is recessed in here, so nothing is really gonna get damaged if you leave it in some rain or some inclement weather. All right, I wanna show you some technology, but I do have to turn the car on and it's gonna be loud, so just hang with me for that. We've got a little graphic here. I just have the clutch in, I haven't pressed anything. Okay. So technology. You do have cruise control, which is pretty cool. You've got this red button, that's your drive mode selector. So you've got Slingshot mode or comfort mode. Couldn't really tell you the difference between the two, but you have a red button on the steering wheel, that's always a good thing. You've got a semi-digital instrument cluster, of course analog for your tach and speedo. Speedo goes up to 220. Like, what? There's 5 gears and this thing has 200 horsepower, so that's kind of ridiculous. Plus, I did take this thing allegedly up to 90 miles an hour, and allegedly it was pretty stable, but I don't know how stable it would be at 220. Anyway, you also have a reverse camera, which is actually pretty good. It's better than some of the reverse cameras in some of the Stellantis vehicles that I've driven lately. But generally speaking, you have some decent stuff. You've got like a road mode, which is actually kind of interesting. It shows you elevation gain, some time stopped, battery voltage, and that sort of thing. You've got nav, which is kind of cool. Of course, you can connect to your phone. You've got wired Apple CarPlay, etc., which is quite nice. And just generally, you've got various settings and screens, music. The, what's it called? Rockford fosgate speakers are actually pretty good. You even have some ambient lighting. There's like some disco RGB lighting going on down here and in the footwells. Of course, you've got some big chunky buttons for volume, and then traction knockers, hazard lights, and then lights up here, which is just kind of cool. It adds that fighter jet aspect to it. And then just a couple odds and ends before we go for a drive. Like, for one, there's no airbags in this car, so make sure you wear that helmet. And we talked about the Batman Arkham Asylum style wing mirrors, which are cool, but of course you don't have a center rear view mirror. So looking out the back, you are gonna have to look to the sides. And you have your fuel filler cap up here behind the driver's seat. I only took this thing to Costco to fuel it. I didn't fuel it anywhere else, but this thing was near impossible to fuel. Most fuel systems, you have to have a portion of the nozzle depressed, so it'll actually dispense fuel. And then they've got sensors and all sorts of stuff to make sure you don't overflow and spill out. So you had to not only do it manually, but you had to get it at just the right angle. It's almost as like when you have a really bad iPhone connection for your charger, and you have to have it just so to get it to charge. That's kind of what fueling this thing was like. But the last thing we'll talk about before we go for a drive is price. Now, a Slingshot for your S base trim in your base manual transmission starts at $22,000. But for the R trim here, the big sporty one with some of the other options, that's gonna start at $35,000 for the manual. It's gonna be another $2,000 for the automatic transmission. If you wanna go for the Roush edition, that one in an automatic is gonna cost you over $40,000. That seems like a lot of money, but this thing is a lot of fun, so let's go for a bit of a drive. Slingshot! 8,500 RPM redline. That doesn't really get old. Now, if I'm honest, it does smell a little bit like oil and gas around 6,000 RPM. But that's kind of the charm of this thing. This thing is so raw to drive. Like, it's such an authentic experience. You're not isolated out from anything when you're driving this car. It doesn't rev match for you. The springs, the shocks, they're a little stiff, they're a little sporty, but that's what you want. The steering is pretty good. I like the fact that I can see what the tires are doing. Come into a corner here. With our friend, the police officer. Well, that's kind of fun. Stay over there, buddy. Okay, he has done. So that's good. But what I was saying, the steering is pretty good. I like seeing what I'm going to get from the front tires and the suspension and the chassis. I can play with the back. It's fun to drive. The thing you got to remember, though, is there's two wheels on the front and one wheel on the back. So there's no such thing as straddling potholes. That's not a thing. Another thing to know is this windshield does a lot. This thing works hard, but above about 60, 65 miles an hour, it's just overcome by wind. So I'm feeling it not right around my eye line, but just above. So it feels like I'm getting a noogie on my head, like kind of constantly. I'm just kind of being shaken around at the top of my head above 60, 65 miles an hour. It's a very strange feeling. And then there's conversations. So we got a reverse slingshot here. That's another thing to notice. Everyone stares at you, and no one gives you a wave. It's the motorcycle thing to do a wave. It says it right here. This is a motorcycle. You drive by another motorcycle, you give them the piece. It's like the Jeep wave. Not one motorcycle driver has given me a wave all week. And so you're kind of like a rebel without a community in a way. So that's a little bit isolating in that sense, which kind of leads me to the culture thing. And it's just that, like, to people that don't know, that aren't like deep car enthusiasts, this just looks like a fun toy. It looks cool because it's so strange looking and different. And it is. But to people within the car community, these are not super highly respected. So understand the culture that you're going to get into with one of these. But with that being said, there are a lot of people that do want to talk to you. The people that are, I wouldn't take this to a car meet, okay? But like when I went to go fill this thing up at Costco, everyone stared as I pulled up. The fuel attendant guy talked to me the entire time I was fueling up. He watched me as I struggled to fuel this thing up. So people want to talk to you about it. People are very interested when they see someone pull up in this thing. But culture thing aside, because I'm not generally a person that gets too concerned with what people think of what I drive, it is just fun to drive. It revs freely. It's a naturally aspirated mill. The steering is tight. The body and chassis control is fun. The handling is great, especially since you only have one wheel on the back. The back end lets you slip and play a little bit. The brakes, I think, and maybe this is just a one-off thing, are the weak point of the car. There's not a huge amount of braking. There's not a huge amount of bite when I get into the pedal. That's probably the downside, the weak point of driving this car. But other than that, it's just kind of fun. I gotta be honest. It's been fun. Brakes, 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 come on. It's a fun thing, man. It's pretty fun, I gotta be honest. My wife made me park it in the garage all week. Usually I have my press cars out in the driveway because I keep my car and her car in the garage. But she made me park this thing in the garage because she was embarrassed for our neighbors to see it. But every neighbor that has seen it has like really liked it and had so many questions and been so interested about it. It's just kind of, it's a novelty. It is. And I think with that, it's probably a good time to end. So thank you to Polaris for letting me have a go in your funky Slingshot. It is funky. That's probably the best word to describe it. So yeah, those people, every single person you drive by just stares at you. So be ready for that, but also be ready to have a decent time on a back road behind the wheel. I'll see you in the next one.